On July 1st, 1863, during the American Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg was fought between the Union and Confederate armies in and around Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The battle is widely regarded as the turning point of the American Civil War. The Union victory halted the Confederacy's invasion of the North, paving the way for the Union's eventual triumph and the preservation of the United States. The battle was also the bloodiest in American history up to that time, with more than 50,000 soldiers killed, wounded, captured, or missing. George Meade and the Army of the Potomac successfully defeated Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia. Following his victory at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May 1863, Lee launched his second invasion of the North through the Shenandoah Valley. He hoped to move the fighting away from Virginia, threaten cities such as Harrisburg or Philadelphia, and convince Northern leaders to seek peace. Meanwhile, Abraham Lincoln replaced Union Commander Joseph Hooker with Meade just 3 days before the battle began. The fighting started on the 1st of July when the two armies unexpectedly met near Gettysburg. Union cavalry under John Buford delayed the Confederate advance until Union infantry arrived. Although Confederate forces pushed Union troops through the town, the Union established a strong defensive position on the hills south of Gettysburg. On the 2nd of July, the Union Army formed a defensive line shaped like a fishhook. Lee launched major attacks against both Union flanks, leading to fierce combat at places such as Little Round Top, Devil's Den, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard, Culp's Hill, and Cemetery Hill. Despite heavy fighting and significant casualties, Union forces held their positions. The final day of the battle on the 3rd of July featured the famous Pickett's Charge, in which about 12,000 Confederate soldiers attacked the center of the Union line at Cemetery Ridge. The assault was decisively repelled by Union artillery and rifle fire, resulting in devastating Confederate losses. Lee withdrew his army the following day, ending his invasion of the North. On November 19, 1863, President Lincoln returned to Gettysburg to dedicate the new National Cemetery for Union soldiers. During the ceremony, he delivered the Gettysburg Address, a brief 271-word speech that became one of the most celebrated and influential speeches in American history, redefining the purpose of the Civil War and honoring those who had fought and died there. On July 1, 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the Battle of San Juan Hill was fought between an American force under the command of William Rufus Shafter and Joseph Wheeler against a Spanish force led by Arsenio Linares y Pombo. The battles for Kettle Hill and San Juan Hill, together known as the Battle of San Juan Heights, were among the most important engagements of the Spanish-American War. Along with the siege of Santiago, they played a decisive role in the American campaign in Cuba. Despite suffering heavy casualties, U.S. forces greatly outnumbered the Spanish defenders and succeeded in capturing the heights. Relations between Spain and the United States had deteriorated during the Cuban War of Independence, as reports of Spanish actions against Cuban civilians fueled public anger in the United States. In January 1898, the battleship USS Maine was sent to Havana to protect American interests. The ship exploded the following month, killing 267 sailors. Although the cause was never conclusively determined, many Americans blamed Spain, increasing support for war. The United States declared war in April. After securing a landing during the Battle of Guantanamo Bay, American forces advanced inland. An earlier clash at the Battle of Las Guasimas preceded the main assault on the strategically important San Juan Heights. About a week later, a much larger American force, including the famous Rough Riders, attacked the Spanish positions. After enduring intense artillery fire, they stormed the hills and forced the defenders to retreat, making the battle the bloodiest and most famous of the war. The victory greatly enhanced the reputation of the Rough Riders and their commander, Theodore Roosevelt. Following the campaign, Roosevelt returned to New York and was elected governor. In 2001, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in Cuba, becoming the only U.S. president to receive the nation's highest military award. On the same day, American forces also won the Battle of El Caney. Together, these victories demonstrated the determination of both the American and Cuban forces, as well as the resilience of the Spanish defenders. After the surrender of Spanish forces at Santiago, Spain agreed to withdraw from Cuba, bringing more than 4 centuries of Spanish colonial rule on the island to an end. 110 years ago, on July 1, 1916, during World War I, the Battle of the Somme was fought by the armies of the British Empire and the French Republic against the German Empire. The battle was fought in northern France between July 1st and November 18, 1916, along the upper Somme River. Planned as a major Allied offensive, it aimed to break the deadlock on the Western Front and achieve a decisive victory. More than 3 million soldiers participated and over 1 million were killed or wounded, making it one of the deadliest battles in history. The battle also demonstrated the devastating impact of modern industrial warfare. The offensive was planned during the Chantilly Conference, where the Allied powers agreed to launch coordinated attacks against the Central Powers in 1916. Originally, French forces were expected to lead the assault with British support. However, after Germany launched the Battle of Verdun in February, many French units were diverted there, leaving the British Expeditionary Force to take the leading role. British troops included experienced regulars alongside volunteers from the Territorial Force and Herbert Kitchener's new army. The Operation Day of the battle produced mixed results. French forces made significant gains, but British troops suffered devastating losses with 57,470 casualties, including 19,240 killed, the highest single-day losses in the history of the British Army. Most casualties occurred where German defenses were strongest. The campaign also marked the growing importance of military aircraft and the first battlefield use of tanks in September, although the early tanks were mechanically unreliable. By the end of the offensive, British and French forces had advanced about 10 kilometers into German-held territory, their greatest territorial gain since the First Battle of the Marne in 1914. Despite this progress, they failed to capture key objectives such as Péronne and Bapaume, and German forces remained in place through the winter. Fighting continued into early 1917, eventually contributing to Germany's planned withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line during Operation Albrecht. Historians continue to debate the battle's overall effectiveness, necessity, and long-term significance. On July 1, 1997, the handover of Hong Kong from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to the People's Republic of China occurred at midnight, which ended 156 years of British rule, dating back to the cession of Hong Kong Island in 1841 during the First Opium War. Hong Kong was part of the British Empire from 1841 until its return to China in 1997. Expect during the Japanese occupation from 1941 to 1945. British control expanded over time through the acquisition of the Kowloon Peninsula, Stonecutters Island, and later the New Territories, which were leased for 99 years beginning in 1898. Under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, Hong Kong was transferred to Chinese sovereignty. China agreed to preserve Hong Kong's separate economic and legal systems under the principle of one country, two systems. For 50 years, at the time of the handover, Hong Kong had a population of about 6.5 million and was Britain's last major overseas colony. The transfer marked the end of more than 150 years of British colonial rule and is often viewed as symbolizing the final chapter of the British Empire. The handover ceremony, attended by Charles III, was broadcast worldwide and represented a significant historical milestone. It also reflected Britain's declining influence in the Asia-Pacific region, following events such as the Japanese conquest of Hong Kong and Singapore during World War II, the Suez Crisis, the Malayan Emergency, and the Aden Emergency. In the decades after the handover, the influence of China's central government increased significantly, following the 2019 to 2020 Hong Kong protests. Beijing introduced the Hong Kong National Security Law and implemented major electoral reforms in 2021. These measures were criticized by the British government, which argued that China was failing to meet its commitments under the Joint Declaration. Many observers believe these changes have subsequently reduced Hong Kong's political autonomy, while the Chinese government maintains that the measures are a necessity to safeguard national security and secure stability under the one country, two systems framework. And on the same day, STS-94 took place when the Space Shuttle Columbia launched on its 23rd spaceflight with a crew of 7 NASA astronauts. The mission marked the first reflight of the same vehicle crew and payloads, following the shortened STS-83 mission in April due to indications of a fuel cell problem. Primary payload was the Microgravity Science Laboratory 1. A quick turnaround and processing Columbia for the reflight was accomplished in part by the first resurfacing of a primary payload, MSL-1, in the orbiter. The crew consisted of Commander James Halsell on his 4th spaceflight, pilot Susan Kilrain on her 2nd and last spaceflight, Mission Specialist 1 Janice Voss, her 4th spaceflight, Mission Specialist 2 Flight Engineer Michael Gernhardt, his 3rd spaceflight, Mission Specialist 3 Donald Thomas, his 4th and last spaceflight, Payload Specialist 1 Roger Crouch, his 2nd and last spaceflight, and Payload Specialist 2 Gregory Linteris, his 2nd and last spaceflight. And on July 1st, 2002, BAL Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937, a Tupolev Tu-154 passenger jet, and DHL International Aviation ME Flight 611, a Boeing 757 cargo jet, collided in midair over Überlingen, a southern German town on Lake Constance, near the German-Swiss border. All of the passengers and crew on board both planes were killed, resulting in a total death toll of 71, including 52 children. The official investigation by the German Federal Bureau of Aircraft Accident Investigation concluded that the mid-air collision was primarily caused by multiple failures within the Swiss air traffic control system responsible for the affected airspace, along with unclear procedures governing how pilots should respond to instructions from the Onboard Traffic Collision Avoidance System, or TCAS. Nearly 2 years after the accident, on February 24, 2004, Peter Nielsen, the air traffic controller on duty at the time of the collision, was murdered in an apparent act of revenge by Vitaly Koloyev, a Russian architect whose wife and 2 children died in the accident. Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937 was a charter flight traveling from Moscow, Russia to Barcelona, Spain, with 60 passengers and 9 crew members. Among the passengers were 46 school children from the city of Ufa in the Republic of Bashkortostan. The students were taking part in a school trip to the Costa Daurada region of Catalonia, organized by the local UNESCO committee. Many of the children's parents were senior officials in Bashkortostan, including the head of the local UNESCO committee. After traveling overnight by train to Moscow, the group was mistakenly taken to the wrong airport and missed its originally scheduled flight. They remained in Moscow for 2 days before securing the charter flight that eventually departed from Domodedovo International Airport on July 1st 2002 at 10:48 p.m. Moscow time, bound for Barcelona International Airport. The pilots of BAL 2937 consist of Captain Alexander Gross, 52, who has more than 12,000 flight hours, including 4,918 hours on the Tu-154, to his credit. The co-pilot, First Officer Oleg Grigoriev, 40, the chief pilot of Bashkirian Airlines, had 8,500 hours of flying experience, with 4,317 hours on the Tu-154, and his task was to evaluate Captain Gross's performance throughout the flight. Murat Itkulov, 41, a pilot with close to 7,900 flight hours, 4,181 of them on the Tu-154, who was normally the first officer, did not officially serve on duty because this was the captain's assessment flight. Sergei Karlov, 50, was the flight navigator with approximately 13,000 flight hours, including 6,421 hours on the Tu-154. And Oleg Valayev, 37, was a flight engineer who had almost 4,200 flight hours, all of which were on the Tu-154, joined the three pilots in the cockpit. DHL International Aviation ME Flight 611 was en route from Bahrain International Airport and Manama, Bahrain to Brussels Airport in Brussels, Belgium, with a stop at Orio El Serrillo Airport in Bergamo, Italy, and departed Bergamo at 2306 CEST. The two sole pilots on board the DHL Boeing 757 consist of a 47-year-old British Captain Paul Phillips, who had logged close to 12,000 flight hours, including 4,145 hours on the 757, and 34-year-old Canadian First Officer Brant Campione, who had accumulated more than 6,600 flight hours, with 176 of them on the Boeing 757. I hope you like my historical milestones for the 1st of July. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe. This is Stephen Luke, and to those who are Canadian, I want to wish all of you a happy Canada Day. And I'll see you all for another historical milestone video.